Hey there, welcome to episode 109 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I'm your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. Today we are recording at 7:10 a.m., so my mouth is not working quite as well. On this Tuesday, March 18, 2025, today's episode, we are going to be speaking about the full stack. You heard that right. You heard that twice. Full stack. If you're not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, we are a Nevada nonprofit corporation, a 501c3 public charity. Our purpose statement on file with all these various government entities to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Purposely vague. We've talked about this previously more than once. We started life as Code for Vegas. A reboot, Code for Vegas Foundation, a reboot of the original Code for Vegas from like a decade ago. Among other things, we found that people were not always connecting the name with the fact that not everything is code. I'm not a coder, therefore I'm not interested, not welcome. This isn't for me. So Innovate for Vegas, we renamed and we aim to include as many people as possible across various interests and what they might call themselves. Are you a coder? Are you an artist? Are you a creative person? Hopefully everybody's creative. And then along the way, we might learn something interesting, which is basically the focus of today's episode, as a matter of fact. Hopefully wherever you've found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which concludes the show notes, a brief summary that I will read to you, and then a few links that go with this episode, the usual 4, and then a link about what full stack is on Wikipedia. So the sooner we get started, the sooner you get on with your week. So let us begin the summary of today's episode. If you are in the tech world, you may have seen or heard the term full stack developer. What if you are involved with something better than that? The full stack is everything, especially the non-coding parts, and this is what we are doing. Not everything is code. Better. See, I'm a software engineer, so I can make fun of us and everyone who pursues that. If you're working on something and you only have software engineers, you need to get more people. We don't know everything. The links for today's episode, the usual 4, as I've said. If you've heard this audio program before, you have heard, not this episode, but you've heard this list. First, we'll start out with our homepage, innovateforvegas.org, innovate F-O-R, Vegas. All one big word, period, O-R-G, innovateforvegas.org. It includes our gatherings calendar, a little bit of information about our governance, a quick rundown on some of our initiatives, and all of it needs some beautification. If only we had some full stack developers around. I kid. It does the job, but there's I'm sort of in the middle of getting some publishing tools in place so we can automate some of these things. All of the pages that I'm going to mention for the 3 links, our homepage, innovateforvegas.org, and the next 2 are what's called static pages. They're hosted on GitHub using GitHub pages. So making that work is one of those things. It's like learning how to bake a cake or drive parallel parking. How about that? It's one of those things. You should be able to do it. So building a publishing scheme, a publishing workflow, if you like. Not a content management system, a publishing workflow. So innovateforvegas.org homepage, check that out for your basics. Project-act.info. The hyphen is the key next to your the 0 on most keyboards. Some people call it a dash. I think it's technically a dash, but it might be a hyphen. Hyphen dash, N dash, M dash. It's one of those. .info. That is where our autonomous cohort tessellation initiative is based. It has its own GitHub organization, and ideally we'll have a few people participating and contributing to that. It is to aid discovery amongst civic volunteer cohorts and maybe others, autonomous, bottom-up, decentralized, federated, and then to maybe enable connection, communication, and collaboration across different cohorts. Because sometimes your local volunteer organization, like Innovate for Vegas, for example, doesn't have all of the skill sets or interest or population that would help make any particular initiative or project go. So projectact.info is still in its early stages, but we'll get that going nicely. agileforvolunteers.org is our version, our take on the classic agile methodology for project management, or I don't think they use the word project management, but it's to make the most of the time that people spend on software projects back in the original days of agile. We are applying it to volunteers, so people who do not have the full-time job of being software developers, and as well for non-software developers. So anyone volunteering on community elevation initiatives such as ours, in a cohort such as ours, our nonprofit public charity organization, can hopefully benefit from making the most of their time and the time of their fellow volunteers by making use of Agile for Volunteers. And it will always be up for improvement and iteration. The Agile industrial complex has left a bad taste in most people's mouths, but we're keeping it real, and we are basing this entire effort on the first principles established in February of 2001, the original Agile, the Agile Manifesto. That initiative is a little bit further along. It has its own GitHub organization, and there's a lot more documentation and process in place. So that will hopefully see the light of day for everyone. It's there. You can check it out. There are slightly polished websites for both of those two, and they will probably look somewhat similar in general layout to our main homepage. But again, working on a publishing workflow to make that stuff easier. Mastodon.Vegas is our not quite making it to the top of the to-do list, activity pub-based social media engagement platform. It makes use of the Mastodon Activity Pub, decentralized, federated social media platform everybody knows and loves, or should. So we'll be maintaining the Vegas-centric Mastodon server one of these days. And finally, Full Stack, a Wikipedia link to solution stacks, and then there's an anchor selector for Full Stack Developer. You can scroll around the page, though. There's a whole list of different stacks, more than I was familiar with. I'll let you flip through that if you want. The notion is sort of, it's become almost trite to say, like, in this day and age, everybody kind of has to know how to do everything. And that is one of the agile principles, a whole team approach. Everybody should sort of have some idea what's going on. But when you hear full stack developer, or if you see that in a job description, it usually means we're going to pay you for one person, but you have to do the work of 5 people. So you have to be ready for that. But of course, for volunteer organizations, the pay is horrible, but the rewards are amazing. So full stack shorthand. Over the years, maybe over the decades, the notion that each individual contributing to a particular project could, even should, specialize in some aspect of the overall has faded a bit, with a tendency to ask, even require, developers to be experienced and competent with all aspects of the parts of a particular project, or the stack. I will say in my experience, when I first started programming for money, as a job, as my day job, after I got my engineering degree, it was, for the most part, here's your cube, or here's your desk, or here's your table or chair, whatever. You're going to work on this, and it's going to be software development, or it's going to be user interface design, or it's going to be database management, or it's going to be, it's going to be fairly focused. But over the years, probably because it is sort of cumbersome sometimes to get people to coordinate their ideas, even though Agile does endeavor to do that, it has become commonplace to say, okay, can you do the JavaScript front end and the HTML, and can you write the code, and can you design the database and manage the protocols and the transactions and the debug and the logging and the infrastructure as code development? Can you do all those things? Because we're going to pay you one salary, and it will be a fraction of what you should be worth. So, cynical much? So this actually does merge nicely with a whole team approach, though, for development. though this term usually refers to just the technical parts. So if you see or hear full stack, they're usually talking about some of the items, some of the frameworks and databases and whatnot. So as you can see, if you flip through the Wikipedia page, most of the stacks in the somewhat lengthy list in this context involve a database of some sort of programming language that executes on the server, and a programming language and maybe a framework or libraries that execute on the client side, pretty much JavaScript. And these things will run inside the browser. So you have two sides communicating with each other and all the fun that leads to. So one person usually has to understand all of that, and is usually going to be doing a lot of the work involving all of that. Now, you may have a team of multiple people, but if you're a full stack developer in this context, then you should be able to do the whole thing by yourself, essentially, and then hope you will not be expected to. While it is useful to be able to converse amongst the whole team with technical familiarity, and that's basically what they're trying to get, the full stack can often leave out the people who are not focused on the tech stuff, including interacting with the users or consumers of the initiative, or at least some of its parts, people who will tell the story, like marketing, and ask for feedback, people who will design the look and feel, those who will test it. And let us not forget all the things not listed here, because there are many. Depends on what you're building, what you're trying to accomplish. So often there are pieces and parts that need to be made or assembled that may not have been accounted for up front. And that's the nature of an iterative design process, especially if the whole team is involved. So everybody kind of chimes in along the way. Hey, what would make this even better? And then you can modify whatever you're working on to accommodate this creativity. So the full stack, roll credits. So the full stack is more than just the database and some JavaScript, to be sure. One aspect of Agile, and as well with our Agile for Volunteers implementation, is aimed directly at expanding this notion to include the various, my first official typo, double typed the, as well with our Agile implementation, is aimed directly at expanding this notion to include the various people and roles that actually make these things go. Yes, the customers are included not only from a co-creation standpoint, but they are the main reason to build the thing, right? So a quick side note that applies to the contributors notion. I have spoken to people in the civic volunteer space, but also just in general. There are those who do not make a particular project or an overall initiative happen and then get credit for their work, attribution for their contributions, if you will. All too often, when it comes to tech-ish stuff, there's a presumption that the contributors are the coders. And in fact, this is reinforced if the coders are the one that maintain probably a GitHub repository with the code in it, and then they maintain the contributors file, which has all their names in it. And then if you're not using GitHub or you don't really even know about these things, then you're off doing your contributing work, your effort, you're making it happen. And then when the thing gets out and about, launches, deployed, people are putting it to use out in the field, however you want to, it's put into service, whatever terms you'd like to use, you may not even think about the contributors file. So our policy is to make the contributors file inclusive of all the people that are contributing to a particular initiative or its component projects. So really, we start off with everyone who is participating should have a GitHub account, and you should all be participating in a few of the aspects of the Agile for Volunteers workflow using the GitHub tools. Now, we use GitHub. We'll try to adapt it as well to GitLab and maybe Bitbucket and some of the other ones. So basically, if you are able to keep track of simple things like tasks and user stories, using some of these tools, and then keeping track of the work you're doing so that you can be included on that list. Hey, I made this thing go. I was a tester. I was interacting with our co-creation efforts with our end users, our customers, our motivation for doing all this. So it's incorrect thinking to believe that the coder is the only one that should be the only ones, if there's more than one, that should be contributing, should be included in the contributors file, which is a list of names, right? What did they work on? What did they do? Contributors. The coders are amongst the population of contributors. Usually there's more than just coders because not everything is code. It's no way to encourage volunteers to contribute their time, effort, and expertise if they go unrecognized. So it's an important thing. So the full stack is all the tools, the knowledge, the methodology, the communication, the iteration, and then the eventual solution that comes from, in the case of civic volunteerism, the time, effort, and expertise contributed by volunteers, regardless of the specific corner of the overall initiative. They may be coding over there, they may be creating some user interface over here, they may be writing some documentation, they may be translating it to other languages, and so on. Maybe there will be a ton of coding, maybe a ton of physical engineering, if you're mechanically inclined, perhaps. Maybe a ton of creative visualization, maybe a ton of accessibility checks. Make sure people that can't see can still make use of this thing or hear, etc. Words and translations and so on. And the customers, the users, those who could and should be included in a co-creation process and who will ultimately find utility in this effort. Hopefully, these are all members of the team. Let's use food as an example. I always do this. You know, I like to use food innovation especially, but today we'll just talk about the food preparation, a normal steady state restaurant. But normally food innovation is my go-to example. So suppose the traditional full stack is a kitchen staff, the chef, sous chef, line cooks, preps, dishwashers, porters, and sometimes yet more specific roles, making the full stack work in that particular setting, sometimes for a particular event or maybe just any day of the week. So maybe you'll have an event chef, maybe you'll have a banquet chef, whatever. You know, there are more roles than I even thought about when I was flipping through a couple of web pages out there. So if you're in the kitchen line of work, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in that back of the house. So as most people know, the goings on in what is usually the back of the house, hey, look, I predicted what I wrote in my notes, are a mystery. Very rarely are people in the front of the house, the customers, are they aware of the intricacies. I'm not saying they have no idea, but I'm saying, yeah, you don't really think about it. Stuff is just happening like magic. But we usually all engage with the front of the house, the host, a server, maybe for our table or just general servers, runners, bussers, possibly bar service, cocktail servers, etc., maybe others. Let us not forget as well the people who maintain the restaurant itself, the people who advertise, coordinate events, get those menus printed, and then an occasional external provider like food delivery, trash removal, exterminators, repair folks. I left out plumbers to make sure those bathrooms are working, health inspectors, and anyone I'm leaving out. So a lot of stuff is going on. So often the chef will be the one that's recognized, the celebrity chefs, especially here in Vegas. But there's a lot of stuff going on to keep that chef moving. Most important, if you're really thinking about it, the customers, the restaurant patrons for whom all of this unfolds. Come on now, no customers, no real reason to go through all this chaos, prepare food at scale, and their feedback, smiles, frowns, complaints. So close. I gotta start over because I had this whole thing ready to go. The restaurant patrons for whom all this unfolds. No customers, no real reason to go through all this chaos, prepare food at scale, and their feedback, smiles, frowns, complaints, compliments, and reviews all create something of a feedback loop that propels a group of people larger than the chef and line cooks and their various minions hiding in the back of the house. And again, all the other support staff and the people who are there sometimes, occasionally, making sure that things are working, making sure that everybody is eating safe food and can wash their hands and enjoy the atmosphere safely and comfortably, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into running a restaurant. In fact, if you ever want to, you can read any number of books out there. I think I've mentioned previously, I've certainly read Kitchen Confidential by the late Anthony Bourdain several times. His stories, while not 100% truthful, they're all the best stories rarely are, but certainly gives some indication of the work and the chaos and the vastness, the scope and grandeur of what it is to be in a busy restaurant, trying to make sure people leave happy. So let's talk about initiatives and projects. The same sort of thing applies to much more than restaurants, of course. The phone many have in their pockets are many times more complicated, but equally dependent on the talents of many more than the engineers building the hardware. Somewhere in the back of the house, sort of. Sometimes a volunteer effort will require many collaborators to perform some task out in the real world, like a food drive or a roadside litter cleanup undertaking, for example. These are sort of normal, everyday volunteer tasks that probably involve a lot of people. So we don't have to overly tax volunteers. So the more the merrier, as they say. Maybe organizing and executing a hackathon or asking people in your locality for their feedback during any undertaking in a co-creation effort. For our part, our initial collection of initiatives are software-centric. I hope Amazon makes this product quieter. I'm assuming you can hear all this. Lovely. Stop. That's a volunteer project that needs to come to an end. So our part, all our initiatives are software centric to get started because using tech to address some gaps that could, if addressed, elevate our communities in different ways is a little bit easier because software initiatives are easier to pursue than hardware or other physical initiatives to get things started. If you're going to start a new volunteer organization and you start by saying, okay, we're going to start building mechanical or electrical, computer technology, so on, your costs right out the gate are going to be prohibitive to say the least. So starting off with some software, having a table in a coffee shop, or in our case, the International Innovation Center downtown to coordinate some hackathons and collaborative efforts, very reasonable starting point. So we did start off with software, but as I've intimated, not everything is software, not everything is code, not everything is an app. So as our cohort population grows in number and in skills diversity, we can grow the number of initiatives and their complexity. Hopefully only complication, but things sometimes get complex. Hopefully not too much. As we have covered previously, our view on inclusivity and diversity is focused more on what people would like to do to contribute and how they can participate in our initiatives and with their fellow volunteers. The more the merrier, and the more likely we will be to tackle the nuances. I bring this up because DEI has gotten a lot of press lately. We don't hire people. We're 100% volunteer. So in case you're curious, we really want to get more than just coders who like JavaScript. So we'd like to include people who are not coders, and we would like people with a diverse set of skills and interests. So if you're curious, that's again where we focus those efforts. If we take our open transit initiative as an example, writing some code is one thing, but what about designing the user experience for some who will use a small mobile screen? Some of those who might be vision impaired, might have vision impairments, I should say. Others who might use a larger laptop or desktop monitor, color contrast and layout for the various use cases, not to mention instructions and general documentation, possibly in multiple languages, testing, user feedback, more testing, and the possibility of integration with some other systems, maybe even hardware systems like Bluetooth beacons, accelerometers, the vehicles used in public transit themselves, and so on. And add to all this interacting with transit agencies and exploring scheduler algorithms and arrival estimators and more. A lot of moving parts, literally, just for something as simple as trying to figure out when my bus is going to get here so I can go to the airport or to work or to school or wherever. So all those areas that can make your project, your initiative, that much better will usually require either learning new skills or honing some skills you didn't know you had, which I'll probably repeat later, or finding some new volunteers to join the cohort who can say, oh, I love designing user experience for people trying to get to work. And by the way, you wouldn't think about it, but when you're trying to get, I got to catch the bus. It's going to be here in 2 minutes, or maybe it's not going to be here in 2 minutes. I need to know when it's going to get here, and I need to know if it's going to get where I'm going. And I can't spend the time trying to figure out how your app works. So user experience is a non-trivial thing. And if you leave that to your coders, that's not good. So again, a diversity in interests, skills, and where you can apply those is an important part of the civic volunteer goals, aims in general. It will make everything easier. Although it's always possible that the cohort you have can pick up some new skills along the way as well. So the real full stack, given all these things, the full stack or the real full stack probably includes some software. Most things do nowadays. It's a fact of life at this point. I once was at a coffee meetup, and I said something to the effect that there's non-tech, and this person interrupted me and he said, well, what do you mean by non-tech? Because I use computers in everything I do for my, whatever he was working on. And I'm not a programmer, but I certainly use technology, and I have to understand some aspects of it so that I can use it, and I have to know when it's not working, and so on. So I stood corrected. If you can't figure out where the tech is, then you're probably not looking hard enough, because there's tech in almost everything nowadays. So as well as testing, designing, more testing, surveying users, iterating, documenting, and some marketing, integration, customer support, updating, issue tracking, like updating a project, issue tracking, and the list goes on and on. And here I'm just thinking about the Open Transit initiative that I just described. Each initiative and its various component projects, and I'm using our Agile for Volunteers terminology here. So an initiative has one or more component projects. So Open Transit Initiative might have a user front end or mobile application component project. It might have an estimator that runs on a server somewhere, and so on and so on. So each initiative and its various component projects will likely benefit from a cohort that is not only coders, because not everything's code. And this was implicit in the old school Code for Brigade naming scheme of old, Code for Vegas, for example. And this is where our name change and our notion of inclusivity comes into play. Not everything's code, not everything is an app. So I'm not a coder. Well, come on down. I'm more of a visual person. Okay. I like doing audio. Okay. I like writing. I like language translation. These are all good things and all essential. So come on down. Innovation takes many forms, and that was part of our name changing strategy. Anytime anything interacts with people and vice versa, there will always be the user experience and a certain sensibility that goes along with that to be concerned with, not to mention a variety of useful abilities that might enhance function, overall utility, or even longevity. Will this thing last for more than a month? Making things that last more than a month and that are useful for a large fraction of that lifetime is it's a nice goal to pursue. It's also a job skill to keep in mind, whatever it is you're doing, which is why a diverse set of skills come in handy. A diverse set of skills comes in handy. In fact, you may discover that you have skills or interests in developing skills you didn't know you had until you suddenly find yourself needing to design a logo or needing to design a logo. Boy, get it. We're coming to the end, I promise. Or something normally outside of your wheelhouse, as the saying goes. So if there's no one else to do it and you'd like it to be done, then sometimes you have to get good at something. Or what I've found in my travels is if you do it just good enough so that you can find someone who will say, who designed this logo? And you're like, I don't know. And they're like, give me that. Maybe they'll help you out. The final point for today's episode. So we're right at around 30 minutes. So we're pretty good. Trying to keep them less than an hour. I'm doing it for you. If you're picking up on what I'm putting down here, the real full stack is the people in the cohort, and by extension, the people who we'll call them our users or our customers, our reason for doing this stuff. Users sounds a little weird. Customers, we're not really selling them something. So it's somewhere in there though. You're the reason for doing this stuff. The tools, the methods, and the actual collaboration, all of these combined in useful and interesting ways to yield a few aha moments. And maybe, just maybe, that outcome that makes it all worthwhile. Ideally, your customers or your end users or your users in general will take the time to say, hey, this works. I'm glad I was a part of the co-creation process. Or maybe next time I will be because I missed out this time. We launch it, whatever it is, and move on to the next thing, just like that. Piece of cake. So the take home is that everything we're working on, first of all, our collection of initiatives hasn't grown in a while, but then neither is our cohort. But ideally, there will be a couple of things. Most of our initiatives are designed to be sort of interoperable, like they'll fit together. So as people join our cohort, they might find some aspect of one of the initiatives that is interesting or familiar to them, or maybe something they'd want to learn about. So interesting, but not necessarily an existing skill or ability they possess. So someone might say, oh, the Open Transit initiative looks interesting. I can work on some cool icons or some language translation, and so on. So the goal, though, is to also enable people in the full stack or the real full stack to participate in designing new initiatives. Because our organization drives its own initiatives so far, and we'll see how, if we accept initiatives from third parties, sponsors or similar. But for the moment, we're driving our own. So our entire organization can drive its own initiatives, design them, design the workflow, Agile for Volunteers, and then interact with our end users, customers, the people out in the world, the communities we're attempting to elevate. And we can get their feedback and we can have ongoing development of whatever it is. And then we might add a few more things, some sort of, the My Muni project initiative is probably the base for this, although technically it's Smart Social. But we may say, what would be useful is if we had a particular initiative that was focused on education, like connecting schools to after-school activities and tutoring or other mentors or something like that. So that could be an entire initiative, and we could develop an entire user experience, and maybe that would all fit into the My Muni initiative, and this could be applied in other places. So it's not really Vegas specific. So our real full stack is all of these things I just mentioned with an eye on the notion that what we are trying to build in the greater Vegas area here at Innovate for Vegas Foundation may be for the people of Vegas, but it may also be useful, whatever it is, to people in other places, which is one of the reasons our full stack notion, our full stack notion includes people with all these different skills and abilities and interests and whatnot from other places outside of the greater Vegas area. So our real full stack is as big and interesting as possible. And hopefully that will help us drive our various initiatives, the ones we have and the ones we have yet to imagine. And then we'll see what happens. So that's the rundown, the full stack. Every time I see the word full stack, the words full stack, whenever you see like a job description or you see, especially on LinkedIn, the awful LinkedIn, hey, my colleague is hiring. They need a full stack developer to work on this and that, whatever. Here's something to think about as I leave you. The internet is powered by WordPress. Some ridiculous percentage of websites on the internets are WordPress powered. No telling that, they get a lot of traffic, but it's 70% or something. In fact, let's see, percentage of websites built with WordPress. Wow. 43%. Okay. Oh, no. Oh, weird. Total websites is 43.5%, but content management websites, that is anything that's in the, WordPress scheme of things, 61.7. Now I seem to remember it was something like 73 or 74%. So maybe it's coming down at long last, but not everything is WordPress. So even though they had, my argument was going to be, the internet is powered by WordPress. Why do they need so many full stack developers? But the fact is, if you want to do something creative, if you want to do something that's purpose built, that actually solves real problems without trying to make do with the plugin, whatever, extension economy that is WordPress, sometimes you have to build things that help to realize the vision or to solve the problem at hand and so on. But not everything is code. So having really good user interface design, user experience design, actually listening to your future users and customers, that co-creation effort does require some interacting with people. So that's an important thing. There are so many roles, there are so many pieces and parts that can all fit together. And the full stack, the real full stack, really starts with the people in your cohort, one or more people who are going to make this thing go, whatever it might be. And then you build from there. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for listening as always. And that's it. That's all I have to say for today. Cheers.